Hello, my name is Margaret Adele, and it's time for a video that I actually wanted to make before, but haven't had the best incentive until now. So I have been reviewing indie books for almost a full calendar year at this point. I uploaded my first review in January of 2019. It is currently December of 2019 as I film this. And for every review I ever do, I am always very aware of the fact that the author whose work I am reviewing will be reading or watching every review I do on their work. It's kind of part of the deal. If I got the email from the author, I can be reasonably sure they're going to be reading up on whatever review I do. And that tends to make me slightly paranoid, to the extent that if in that review request email, I get the gist that they might not be on board with the less than favorable review, I will actually say no. This could be things like them talking about how it's their baby, their heart, their soul, they worked on it for a decade. Maybe not, or there was an instance where they quite literally asked me not to post the review if it was negative. And in that case, I'll say no entirely. Because no one wants to do a review when they know that the person they're reviewing is going to be trying to clap back if they don't like it. Which brings us to our topic of today. Funnily enough, I did not mean for this video to come up during the same time as the drama happening on the indie book Twitter. So I have to preface this by saying I did not get the message from the person that is going around on book Twitter, and I forget their name exactly, but if you go and you search the right Twitter handles, you can probably find what everyone is talking about. There is an indie author that has just been going off the rails, responding negatively to every negative review and calling people out, and it's a whole thing. And it just so happens that in the same time period when a different indie author was losing their minds and ranting about reviews, I got the first negative response to review of my indie review career. I had almost made it an entire calendar year with nothing but gracious replies to even more negative reviews. So we're going to go through this message, and I will be keeping it as vague as possible. I will be paraphrasing because some of the wording of the message could tell you who it was, but because this person kept it private, which is one of the only good things they did about the situation, I'm going to return the favor and not drag any names. So first of all, this message that I got right out of the gate asked me why I was reviewing indie books. And the implication here is that if I'm going to support indie community, and if I'm going to call myself a supporter of the indie community, well then why am I rating it low? I'm pretty sure that it is not an exaggeration at this point to say that I am indie book obsessed. There are some months where of the 10 or 12 books I read, only 2 are traditionally published. But because I read so much indie, I know for a fact that it runs the gambit when it comes to things like quality. You could find some absolutely fantastic storytelling, your new favorite 5-star. I started writing fan fiction about a book. I loved it that much, and it was indie. But I also know that it can run to the other direction that is full of typos and struggles and really should have gone through more revisions, or should have been one of those books that was kept on the hard drive and started something new. It does not benefit the community for me to promote all of those books equally or rate all of those books the same. Then we get into this struggle of promoting the stereotype of self-published books as being trash from people who can't hack it as real authors. And we have things like my reviews wouldn't mean much because a 5-star doesn't mean much when every book gets one. So no, me rating an indie book low does not mean that I hate the whole indie community or that I want to see it fail or that I'm not supporting it. Because I guarantee you, for every 1 2-star review book I put up, and that literally is the lowest I've gone in my review career to date, there's probably 3 or 4 4 or 5 stars. I don't actually rate that many books that negatively because if I can finish it and it makes it to my channel, there's something about it I liked. So this person then continues on to call me unprofessional because I rated it low, and this part was laughable to me because an author calling out a reviewer is about as unprofessional as you can get. So then we continued on with the classic, well, you just rated it low because you didn't understand it. You missed these plot points and these details. Here's the thing about a review. I am not going to go in depth with every point. That is a really long review. That is an obnoxious review. No one wants to read or watch that review. I don't know if you're like me when you get on Goodreads and like you click the reviews and you see like the 20 paragraph essay where they recount the entire book. I hate those. If my reviews make it more than like 7 paragraphs, then there's really something in that book I needed to talk about. So in general, I will probably skip the more middling plot points and focus on what really stood out for either good reasons or bad reasons. I'm not going to talk about every single point, but in general, the you didn't like it because you didn't understand it vibe is also a bad look. But let's talk about the funniest / worst / thing you should never do. They asked me to take the review down. But this was also a funny point because they said they wanted me to take the Amazon review down because that was quote unquote their space, but I could leave the YouTube review up. Now this is laughable because you honestly think that you're being gracious in letting me keep the review video that I made, while also declaring that the Amazon space is their space. Here's the thing. When a book is published, you are now sharing it with the reader. In a strange way, while you are getting all the royalties from that, while it technically is your copyrighted material, in a metaphorical, cultural sense, that book is no longer yours. That book will not be viewed the same way as you view it. The characters will look different and will be viewed differently. So as a result, that's not your space. That is the book's space. And the review section of a book space is for reviewers and prospective readers, not the author. Review spaces are never for the author. Now, I know there are authors that will use their reviews as feedback and how to better themselves in the future. I've actually had authors message me after a middling review and be like, okay, what do you think I could work on? And I love that. You don't have to. I'm not a beta reader, but you can use it. But it is not an author's space. And it should never be considered an author's space. Now, here's the thing. I did actually take it down. But I took it down because I knew I wanted to make this video. So I took down the Amazon review, the video review, and the tweet linking to the Amazon and nope, just the video review. Losing my mind. Anyway, I don't want to name drag because once an author gets a reputation for being the kind of author that calls out negative reviews, it can tank your reputation, your sales, and your career. And we are seeing that on book Twitter currently. There is currently an author that has disliked most of the reviews of her arc. I believe it is a YA fantasy, and I'm not going to try to pronounce her name because even though she's not acting with anything even close to professionalism, I'm not going to be unprofessional and both name and then, botch that name. So if you really want to look into it, again, I suggest hopping over on Twitter. I will maybe link something if you're really interested in it. But for mine and my personal struggle with this specific author, I am not going to basically say anything about it. I have not even mentioned the genre they write in. If you are truly 100% Margaret, I really don't want to risk reviewing a book from someone that might clap back or might try to go ranty on me, then I will maybe have that conversation with you privately. But if I can avoid it, I don't want to get a reputation for, just tossing out names of indie authors that I don't like. But as we are seeing on Twitter, once you get this reputation, it goes badly. The amount of tweets I have seen in response to this author basically adding everyone being like, well, she's on my DNR list, never going to touch this stuff. And in indie author world, you don't have a lot of clout to lose. Once you get that reputation and your sales start tanking, it's not like a traditional author sense where someone could still wander into a bookstore and see your book on a shelf. A lot of the indie community is very knowledgeable because they have to be. So you can't afford your name being dragged through the mud like this. Or I guess in this case, dragging your own name through the mud. So that brings us to the question of, well, what do you do if there's a review you just really didn't like? The obvious answer to this being, ignore it. I've given less than positive reviews and they were just ignored, and that is valid. I've given middling reviews and the author has taken out like the 1 or 2 really positive sentences and put them on their social media to market. I respect the hustle, that's fine. If you would like to professionally and respectfully ask for clarification on points, but that I would highly caution against unless you are absolutely sure that you can ask with respect and with a level head and no hurt feelings are going to get involved. Because at the end of the day, a negative review against an author's book is not a negative review against the author. As much as it feels like it is, the book isn't your soul. It isn't your heart. It isn't you. I have had some books where I could not finish the book. I DNF'd it, and then I had to go tell the author that I had DNF'd it because they were for review. And the author responded with so much grace that I came away from the interaction with a very, very high opinion of them while still having a very, very low opinion of their book. They're not the same. And in keeping a very high reputation for yourself and being gracious, you are increasing the chances that even though that one book didn't review well, you could review well in the future with future books. I love a redemption arc. There has never been a single author whose work I reviewed poorly that I said I am never reviewing again. One negative review does not cross an author off of my list. Now, arguing with me, as this author had done, does. So I officially have one name on my blacklist, will never review again, because of this whole nonsense. And this author was lucky enough that they didn't make it giantly public and buckled down every time someone said, hey, maybe don't respond negatively to negative reviews. So they lucked out. And they lucked out that I'm not the kind of person to name and shame, because someone else, another reviewer, might have been. It is a risk to do this. So, in conclusion, the author does not have the right to go after reviewers, because that book space is not your space. That book is not you. That negative review is not a negative review of you. Sometimes the hardest thing in the world is to accept that you put out a piece of art and someone else didn't like it. But in accepting that, you will help ensure that your reputation as an artist stays intact. Because the last thing in this world of indie books struggling to get reviews that anyone wants is an indie author nobody wants to review. And with nothing else to say, I hope you have a wonderful day and a marvelous tomorrow.